On behalf of the Ministry of Faith Baptist Church in Water Valley, Mississippi, welcome. Thanks for viewing this video presentation. The short story, Feathers for Worms, which I'm about to share with you, is adapted by J. Calvin Reed with grateful acknowledgement to the story The Skylark by C.H. Charnley, which was originally published by Allison Anderson Company in London, England. Reed's adapted short story, Feathers for Worms, is one of 30 which he incorporated into a small book titled Bird Life in Wington. Now it's time for me to share with you the short story, Feathers for Worms. But we cannot afford it. You must think money grows on trees, Mr. Isaac Barn Swallow was speaking. But we just must keep up with the other barn swallows, answered Rebecca, Mrs. Isaac Barn Swallow, that is. All of the other barn swallows are lining their nest with down. And with that, she pulled her handkerchief out from under her wing and started to cry. All right, said her husband. I will see what I can do. But feathers are very expensive this year. Mr. Isaac Barn Swallow was no bird's fool when it came to business matters. Also, he was very, very industrious. The early bird catches the worm was his motto. So the next morning, by the time the other birds came to the barnyard to dig for breakfast worms, he had already collected a supply and had opened a little restaurant under an oak tree in the corner of the barnyard. On the outside was an attractive sign. Swallow at Barn Swallows, it read. Mr. Barn Swallow stood in the door and called to the passing birds. Worms for feathers, get your breakfast here. Why waste your time and soil your fingers digging? Barn Swallow's worms are guaranteed to be slick and boneless. How much are your worms? Asked Speedy Skylark as he paused in front of the door. Speedy's real name was Joseph, but since he was so fast and quick on the wing, his schoolmates called him Speedy. However, Speedy was anything but quick and fast around his home. In fact, he was lazy. So lazy that he just hated to dig his own worms for breakfast. 2 for a feather, answered Mr. Barn Swallow. How many will you have? I'll take 4, please, answered Speedy. Turning, he plucked 2 feathers, 1 from each wing, and handed them to Mr. Barn Swallow. He gobbled down his 4 worms and hurried away to school. 2 feathers don't matter, he said to himself. It's so much easier to trade feathers for worms than to dig for them. I'm so glad Mr. Barn Swallow has opened a restaurant. Of course, Speedy did not eat there every morning. Sometimes he dug his own breakfast. But there were quite a few mornings when he roosted late or felt lazy. At such time, he would rush over to Mr. Barn Swallow's, exchange 2 or 3 more feathers for worms, until after a month or so, he did not have so very many feathers left. Still, Speedy did not think it mattered, not very much. At least that is what he thought until yesterday. Yesterday was the day of the big wing meet, with school birds from all over Skyland County gathered for the races. The Wington School was in first place with 256 points, up to the very last race, which was the 100-yard flash. Speedy had been selected to represent the Wington School in that particular race because he had won it the year before. It was generally agreed that no bird was more swift and quick on the wing than Speedy. The Wington cheerleaders were very confident as they called for 15 whistles for Speedy as he and 6 other birds lined up in the maple tree at the end of the stadium. Ready, said the referee. On your limb, go! And Speedy darted forward with all of his might, expecting to be in front all the way. To his amazement, 3 other birds were ahead of him from the start. Halfway to the goal, 2 others passed him, and that left only Pete Buzzard behind. Pete was a graceful bird on the wing, but was considered one of the slowest flyers in Skyland County. But just short of the finish line, Pete sailed past Speedy, leaving him 7th and last in the race, and throwing the Wington School from first place to 3rd in total points. What was the matter? Said Baldy Eagle, the coach, to Speedy after the meet. Speedy could only hang his head. Deep in his heart, he knew what was the matter. That night he could not sleep for worrying. Then there came to him what he thought was a wonderful idea. The next morning he was up bright and early and out digging worms, even before Mr. Barn Swallow arrived. And when Mr. Barn Swallow did arrive, Speedy rushed up to him. "Look, Mr. Barn Swallow," he said, "I have a full box of worms. How many feathers will you trade for these? Please, sir, I want my feathers back." "Trade your feathers for worms?" said Mr. Barn Swallow. "Why, you silly little bird, my business is to trade worms for feathers, not feathers for worms." And with that he turned and walked away chuckling, leaving Speedy alone and broken-hearted. So he carried his worms home to his mother, and then told her the whole story. "I'm so sorry, Mother. What shall I do? Will my feathers grow out again? Will I ever be able to fly as I once did?" "I don't know," Mrs. Skylark answered slowly. "We can only wait and see. My son," she concluded, "you must remember that God has given us some things which He expects us to guard and to keep at all times. If we fail to do that and allow them to get away from us, we can never buy them back again, not at any price." Poor Speedy Skylark. Mr. Barn Swallow was right. What a silly little bird, to trade his beautiful, wonderful feathers that God had given him for worms. Thanks so much for watching this YouTube presentation of the reading of J. Calvin Reed's story, Feathers for Worms, just one of 30 short stories in his book, Bird Life in Wington. On behalf of the members and friends of Faith Baptist Church in Water Valley, Mississippi, I extend our prayers that God will bless your heart and home with His best in Christ Jesus.